Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We are here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. My name's Andy Green.
Me, Felix Scholz.
Felix, who are we talking to this week?
One of my, one of these guys, blah, 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 blah. What was that, Andy? I don't know what that was. Let's
Speechless. You're bumbling. You're that excited for today's
I am
guest.
so excited for today's guest, Tim Barber, who, on paper, he's a journalist. He's a watch journalist.
I'm going to cut in. I describe Tim Barber as the Felix Scholz of Great Britain. Is that an accurate analogy?
Look, in some ways, maybe. He's a lovely guy. I get on very well with him. I'd call him a friend and a colleague. He also writes about poker, I believe, as well. He's got more diverse skill set than I do. So Tim Barber's coming on. I think we've got a little bit of a stacked conversation about the UK. There's been some, what's going on in the watch scene over there, which, we talk about a lot. So we might as well get the local perspective. Before that, we've also got a little bit of our thoughts on the still brand new IWC Ingenieur, which is produced by this week's sponsors, IWCwatches.com. Check them out.
What a great sponsor. What a top tier name to have supporting the podcast.
With all the watch brands starting with I, and with 3 letters, they're my favorite.
I can't think of any other watch brands at the top of my head right now. I'm doing a mental blank other than IWC. No, nothing. It's the only, A to Z. It's just I. Anyway, Felix, you've been up to a bit. You've been gallivanting around. Were you in Hobart last week?
Yeah, a week before, I think, now.
Gosh.
Maybe. I was there with Seiko, having a bit of let's be honest, a lovely few days away, interspersed with occasional watches. Had a quick look at their upcoming 2023 releases. Can't talk about most of them at this point, I don't believe. Good stuff coming. A few surprises and a few just stone cold really nice watches. So, looked at Prospects, Presage, and their other sort of, core and premium lines. Really, really nice stuff. Had a look at the new GMT divers, which I can talk about. Also, Andy, and this may be of interest to you, visited Lark Distillery.
Not only did you visit Lark Distillery, you came back with something.
Yeah, I gave you a little bottle of whiskey.
Very nice of you. How was it? How was Lark?
It was cool. I mean, look, I find colonial Australia pretty creepy. You know what I mean?
Explain.
Well, like it's this, and this is no shade on this is all of Australia, like all those sort of old, convict era farmsteads. It's like they're built by convicts. Like we went to their sort of showroom, was built in like an old sort of farmhouse shearing shed that had that dated back to early days and had gun slits in it.
Yeah, well, I guess Tasmania's got a bit of a strong heritage for the early settlers.
Yeah, I don't know. I find it very creepy, but the whiskey stuff's fascinating. I don't know a lot about, I wouldn't call myself a whiskey connoisseur by any sort of stretch of the imagination, but what I'm most drawn to it, and we spoke to Ian Duncan, was it? The guy from, I'm sure I've
Glengoyne?
Yeah, Glengoyne. Yeah. I find the economics of whiskey so fascinating. Like the guy that sort of took us through said that in Portugal they will brew like a barrel of sherry or a barrel of port or something, and they will pour the alcohol away because there's no value in that, but they can sell the barrel for an amount of money to a Scotch whiskey company or a bourbon company, and this sort of the ongoing international trade deals between the whiskey manufacturers, the wine manufacturers, and the
seasoned barrels.
Yeah, all that stuff, and it's the mixing of it and the science behind it, and it's all Excel spreadsheets. Like the tasting notes are on Excel spreadsheets. The algorithm of what goes into the blend can be reduced into that sort of stuff theoretically. Wow. I find it interesting.
Lark are very good, I have to say. It's a very nice whiskey.
Yeah, and interesting sort of there. We learned a little bit about how they do things differently. which I can't go into too much detail, to be honest, but they're sort of rocking the boat because they're not bound in some ways by regulation in the same way that, the Scots are. Like, what they make couldn't make it to market in Scotland, apparently.
Yeah, right. There you
Because
go.
just because it's such a, it's an important national product there, and they don't mess with the formula. You can make some comparisons there with like Swiss watches and how they play it pretty safe compared to maybe the Japanese or the Germans or guys in the UK, as I'm sure we'll find out in a minute.
There you go. Yeah. So Seiko was good though.
Yes, yes, Seiko
It's
was
awesome
great.
stuff.
Keeping it Japanese with me, you might not have heard that much from me in the last few weeks, and because I've just been playing Zelda all week.
My sister, I told you too, my sister took 10 days off work for the release of this game.
Honestly,
Mm.
I would have done the same thing if
That
I
was the
could.
annual leave chunk for the year, just getting geared up, Zelda, full
If
hibernation.
if my life was slightly different, I would have 100% done the same thing, and it would have been great.
You having a good time with it?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's very fun.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, sure. It's pretty wild, and it's incredible again from a technical point of view what they can do in such a lean way. Like some of the coverage around games was
Mm.
like this other big AAA games are huge. Like you're getting up to, for a patch or an update, you're getting a like 40 gig
Yeah.
download.
Yeah, at
This
least, yeah.
this this whole game was under 20 gig,
Well, I mean, the graphics are pretty, what is it,
pretty
like
lean. Yeah,
720 or something?
yeah, and they cut where it counts, but
People love it though. People seem to love it. I'm gonna have to check it out. You finally checked out something that I'm
we've talked about
90%
it
sure I
before.
recommended this
Yeah,
to you like 2 years ago.
yeah, 100%. I did an Andy.
Yeah.
Uh,
This is your Ted Lasso.
yeah, TikTok made me do it. Mister In Between,
Mm.
Australian crime series, 3 series,
Yep.
written or produced by Nash Edgerton.
Hmm.
Uh,
Directed to, I think.
yeah, there's a bunch of people directing it, but he's a pretty regular in the mix. Follows Ray Shoesmith, who is a criminal, a hitman and extortionist, I suppose.
Mm. He's just a
Um,
fixer, isn't he?
a violent fixer with some anger
Mm.
management problems and a family life that's complicated in the way of TV dramas.
Mm.
Early on, I was about an episode or two in where I'm like, oh, he's a bit of a sociopath. And you were like, oh, no, I don't think he is.
Mm.
I'm now about a season or so in.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if he is. I think he might be still.
Yeah, well, give it another season.
Oh,
He's complicated. Like he doesn't give off the vibe like he's happy with what he's doing. It's transactional. Yeah.
yeah, and you're right. Your sort of main thing that you talked about was he's very professional,
Mm.
and he's very professional. But one thing I've noticed, and maybe this is a Hollywood thing, like they just didn't want to deal with it. He doesn't seem particularly concerned about evidence and getting caught. I don't know if this comes to bite him, but like I've watched enough CSI to know you probably shouldn't be smoking cigarettes over someone you've just killed, and then like putting the butt out, next to the corpse. I'm like, oh, the detective's going to pick up on that shit at some point.
I think he makes the most of the great Australian outback. Yeah, yeah, it does. It gets pretty chaotic. I think he has pretty good anger management. Like he has good self control,
Sure.
but it it is a very very solid. Like I think it's probably one of my favorite series of all time.
Okay. I've got a question for you. Have you watched
Mm,
Breaking Bad?
of course.
Who'd win in a fixer standoff, Mike Ehrmantraut or Ray Shoesmith?
Ooh, Mike's just way like he's way
Yes.
too connected.
Yeah, he's got more skills.
He's got a lifetime of favors to call on. Ray's a bit of a
Mm.
lone wolf,
I'm
and
sure there's a third one, maybe from John Wick. Put him in it.
John Wick wins every time. John Wick does not lose.
Um, what have you been up to? Have you been, hanging out with fictional assassins?
Yeah, speaking of wicks, I have been burning the midnight oil
Have
next
you?
to a Tudor Black Bay 54 that I picked up just yesterday.
Is that the little boy?
That's the I guess mid-size,
Yeah. What do you think?
scaled down 58,
That's 37 mil now?
37. Yeah, you saw this watch in Geneva, didn't you?
Yep. How
I
does it
didn't.
translate to the Australian sun?
Well, I wasn't there, so I got to see most of the new releases. I saw the GMT with the opaline dial. Looks a lot better than the photos, if you ask me. It looks more softer. I think I was expecting something a bit more stark or
Mm,
bleached as far as the white goes, and I didn't
mhm,
really like it in the pics. But in
yep,
person, it's not. It's soft. I saw some Tudor Royals, pretty
sure.
cool. I think those are pretty good value. I have to say. I think they're going to be big in the more like the Asian market. That's probably the
100 yeah,
focus.
100% they are.
But I mean, if you see them here, they're probably going to get snapped up relatively quickly. It's a good value. Like you get a day date, 41 Tudor Royale in two tone with diamonds for like 6 or 7 grand Australian.
That's a nice watch. That's
It's
a
a nice watch. Hey, it's super comfortable. It wears well. Case is good. The bracelet's interesting. There's a lot going on. Day date, but the day date function, like I don't. There's not much. There's not much that can compete with that at that
it's
price point, right?
yeah. What was your pick of I mean, there wasn't that much really, was there? There's a 54, there's the white dial,
Yeah, some
a couple of
updates to the Black
small, yeah.
Bay,
Jubilee bracelet?
Jubilee bracelet or 5 link
Oh,
bracelet,
yes, yes,
the T
please.
clasp. There's some new bezels. There's some new crowns. Bit of reshaping to some cases. A lot of more details that
Yeah,
it
sure.
was weird because I was sort of looking at the updated Black Bays and the GMTs, and I guess having seen them and been around them, like it was the Black Bay was the original kind of watch that got me into really
Yeah,
into watches, and having owned several Black
yeah,
Bays and a lot of Tudors, it was one of those things where I could just look at it like this is a different crown, this
yeah.
is a different bezel, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, it is. It's a different, and just knowing that stuff through ownership
Yes.
and spending a lot of time with it, which
I think it's getting better. It's interesting, like, you look at the original Tudor now, and it's a very of its time design.
yeah.
It's there's a lot that's it's a very important watch, obviously, but there's a lot that's not. mm, We've moved on.
Mhm. I mean, the size, the
It's,
proportions.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
I
very
don't know.
top down design.
Look, I'm one day into the week on the wrist with the Tudor Black Bay 54, so maybe we'll save my thoughts
I'll
for a
talk about it next
week,
week. Yeah,
as we've just gone on a 5 minute chat around the new Tudors that I saw.
yeah,
But I will say, nice stuff, nice enough. It's still a great offering. I mean, the Metis movements, everything going in house, everything certified, everything seems really good quality. The price is not crazy in comparison to 5 years ago. Like I still think, um, as far as bang for buck goes, it's yeah, they're killing it. They're killing it.
sure. Yeah, yeah, they're solid. Um, let's move on to another watch another watch brand that's killing it. I think it's fair to say. IWC.
Yes.
This week's sponsor, IWC
Yep.
Watches, they have released one of, I'm going to say, the most anticipated watches of the last few years for IWC fans. IWC Ingenieur.
Yeah, it's funny, Felix. We had Chris Granger on last year at the Watches and
In the
Wonders.
year
We were
before.
calling him remotely, and one of the questions I cheekily asked him was, "Ingenieur, you didn't do it this year, next year." And the read on his face, because it was a video call, the read on his face was, "Yes, yes, it's coming," and here we are.
That's weird. I thought the read on his face was, I get asked this every interview.
Okay, the
um,
read on his face was, "We know the people are asking for this. I mean, we're bringing it back. We're working on it. It's not as simple as."
and we've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks talking about it with David Seifer and Hannes Pantley.
Mm,
And also, in Geneva, I spent a lot of time talking to people about it. And one of the things they said was that they took a long time on it because they wanted to get it right, like they've done the Ingenieur before.
mm.
Like, I think they kind of knew that they'd have like one shot to nail this, interpretation of the 70s design at this in this moment when that is such a, uh, the expectations would be very hard to live up to, and they didn't want to, I think, disappoint people on that front.
Yeah, so 1970s,
Yeah.
the Engineer was introduced in, I think, the mid 50s
Yes, as a scientist sort
as
of
a
technical
scientisty
watch.
watch,
Yeah, and
but
then
it's got a
yeah,
bit of heritage, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then so the big thing about this one, and this is, look, when people talk about the Ingenieur, there is
Mm.
that 50s version, but I think most people in their heads are thinking the 70s,
Genta.
the Genta design, which is so famous, and which is what this is. It's not recreating it, but
It's
it
a
kind
modern interpretation, I think. I think that's
yeah,
pretty fair to say.
updating it's probably the word to use, like, in the same way that other sort of 70s integrated sports watches aren't recreating the original, but they're, you know
Well, yeah, you got modern movements, modern manufacturing techniques. It's really just sort of leaning on that original design. So of course, you're getting much more reliable and sturdy, and completely in-house movement as opposed to the 70s, which was 60-ish years ago.
Yeah, sure.
The integrated bracelet play from IWC is obviously very welcome.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of a part of the reason that it was so in demand. It was sort of yeah, it's cool to see it come back. Personally, I find it like I love when brands kind of listen to that feedback, and they kind of we want this, and they act on it, and you kind of see that come to fruition. I think that's pretty cool.
The other thing I find really interesting about it, so we've got 4 versions of it at the moment.
Mm.
We've got, black dial, white dial, sort of a greeny, tealy dial,
Teal, yeah, it's teal.
and a titanium version, which is really, really hot. I think that's probably the hardest to get. Uh, everyone and I, watch brands, and IWC in the past are big fans of like iterating constantly. You get a hit design, you're like, okay, we're going to put a chronograph on it. We're going to put a moon phase on it. We're going to
Mm.
make it in all these different metals and cases. I think they're really conscious this time around to play it slow. Like, I'm pretty confident we're going to see a two-tone or a precious metal version. I don't think we're going to be seeing a, double moon phase perpetual calendar anytime soon.
No, no, I think that you have to be pretty conservative as you come out the gates. You talked about the dial colors. The dials have that grid pattern,
Yeah.
which I think is pretty special. I got to see these with you in Melbourne before you jetted away.
Yeah.
They really do add a lot of kind of activity to the dial when it sort of hits the light, and it does. It's texture. That's what it is. It's texture.
I'd I'd
Uh,
I'd say it's razzle dazzle, Andy.
Razzle dazzle. Overall, it's like a really industrial watch.
Yeah.
Obviously, the anti-magnetic cage around the movement is a big thing for the Ingenieur, being that sort of scientist watch. It's got everything you need as far as water resistance. I think it's about 100 meters on the wrist. We integrated bracelet into the case. Sorry, does sit nicely. It's a larger watch, but I think that the integrated bracelet kind of compensates for that. So it just hug nicely.
Yep.
Any other takes I can tell you quickly.
What did you think? Like, this is all sort of facts and figures. What did
Mm,
you think? Like, what mood did it evoke on the wrist, Andy Green, when you put it on?
it's super industrial. It's
Okay.
super, yeah. It's robust and rugged. It was sort of it feels kind of no frills in it, and it's a positive thing.
In the best
Um,
possible way.
yeah, like it wasn't trying to hide behind sparkly surfaces or diamonds or anything like that. Like it feels like a piece of equipment. That's to rephrase what I'm saying. It felt like a piece of equipment,
Yep. Yeah,
a
sure. That
tool,
makes sense.
like a really like tool watch vibes, and that term gets thrown around a lot. But it felt like hardware that you'd find in a
Yeah, I'd
in a
also
lab.
say I think that's true for me as well, but I'd say, like, my initial sort of take was like, if I had one watch and it was this watch, I would happily wear it every day.
I
Uh,
think it ticks all the boxes. If
yeah,
you're a one watch kind of person,
yep.
there's not much that it doesn't have or do.
Fairly slim profile, which is
Yeah,
super
yeah.
important to me, especially on a bracelet watch. Uh,
Yeah, we were. Oh, I don't know if I have the. I think the case height's 10 mil,
yeah, around that. I
which
mean,
is that's pretty slim. Like that's really slim, and it does sit nicely. I got to say, you're right. Good summary,
nice crown
does
guards,
everything.
nice crown guards, fancy enough dial. Like, it's not too much. Like, I think if they, started chamfering all the edges of the every single bracelet edge and,
And I reckon they faced that. I reckon that was, oh, do we polish the center links? Do we do this? Do we chamfer this? And I think that there was some discipline
yes.
in dialing a lot of this design back down to being that tool watch vibe. And I this kind of thing looks like it would be very hard wearing, especially the titanium, but I can just see it getting a lot of character through wear over the
Yep.
years. So I'm excited. Like you, I think that there's going to be probably two tone or gold. I
This
think there's probably
this
more
watch
dials.
this watch in steel with a beaten up gold bezel would look awesome.
Yeah, there you go. There
You
you
know
go,
what I mean?
Felix.
Like, get a bezel that's sort of a bit scratched up and a bit, scuffed. I think it will look really, really nice. I love like an 80s two-tone watch that's lived a life.
It looked really good on you. I got to say, you put it on, you threw it on with a suit, and we put some photos up. It
Yeah.
looked really good on you. Like that watch looked at home
It's a
on
good
your
size for
wrist.
me. It's
You killed it. I think my message would be go check it out. Go to your local IWC boutique. I mean, obviously they're paying us to say this, but definitely go down, check it out. It's interesting. It's interesting for the fact that it has come back, and I think see it in person, try it on,
having
and
said that,
get a feel.
it's going to be hard to see in person. We should mention retail prices. The steel versions 17,300 Aussie. Titanium, if you can find it, 21,700.
There you go. IWC.com.
IWCwatches.com, Andy.
IWCwatches.com. Google IWC, get to your local boutique, check them out. It's always a very cool experience. Felix, the time has come, and I mean that because we need to do this, but the time has come to get Mr. Timothy Barber on the line.
I can't wait. Andy, today's guest, as previously discussed, is the one and only Tim Barber, a veteran of the UK watch media scene. Since 2010, he's been covering watches for QP, The Telegraph, and many, many more. Today, you can find his words at Wired, Esquire, Mr. Porter, and anywhere else that values considered analysis of timepieces. Welcome to OT, Tim. Great to finally have you on. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Felix. Yeah, it's taken a long time, hasn't it? But good to be here. Thank you.
There's also, I suspect that our previous recorded conversation will never make the air.
Yeah, we did a recording a few weeks ago, wasn't it? On a relating to a project that is still waiting to materialize.
It wasn't weeks ago. It was in months ago at the start of the year.
Yeah,
Tim.
Right. Yeah. Well, this year's gone fast. But yeah, there's a very nice thing that we're waiting to appear that we can't talk about until it does, and then that podcast will be completely out of date anyway. So yeah.
Yes. We'll be on to COVID 2024 by then.
Yeah.
Oh dear me. I've got a question for you. This is because I know that you are a professional journalist that hasn't, unlike myself and, Andy, just spent your life talking about something you care very much about, watches. At what point did you sort of get what watches were about?
Well, yeah, I came into it completely by accident. I was working for a newspaper that's based in the city of London, in the sort of the financial district of London. And this was back in 2007. And they kind of said, we need to be covering watches because guys in finance in the city love their watches. And I had no idea about this. And I got introduced to somebody who did know their watches. And I think I just sort of fell a little bit down the rabbit hole. The first interesting serious watch that I saw and that was explained to me was an IWC Portuguese, and this was at a time when I didn't really know that there were mechanical watches. I didn't know that you just didn't put a battery in a watch. I didn't understand anything, and I saw this IWC Portuguese. This was in about 2007, 2008, and I thought it was just so elegant. And I was just sort of gradually introduced into it, and I began to find kind of any excuse I could to talk about watches. And so I don't know if there was a particular moment, maybe a year or two after that, when I went to Basel World for the first time and really kind of understood that this was a hell of an industry and quite peculiar and quite grand, but really quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting origin story. I want to hear, save this for a second. I want to hear your most obscure or peculiar story, because Felix and I have plenty, and often we find ourselves baffling at the situation. But you've just sort of explained how you got into watches through work, which is quite unusual in this day and age. You know, and a lot of the OGs, you know, like yourself, don't start off with a passion and then figure out how to get paid to write about it or work in it.
Yeah.
So how's it been kind of coming through that route? Do you like watches, or is it still work for you?
That's an interesting question, because you're right. I think a lot of the, like, my peers, people I know who have come into it sort of through print media, are like me. You know, we kind of got into it kind of by accident. We liked it, and also back then, around sort of 2008, 2009, 10, where it was when, you know, we were coming out of the crash, and the advertising market had collapsed in most publications, but the Chinese started buying watches, which meant that suddenly the watch industry was going absolutely gangbusters. So every newspaper suddenly wanted to do a watch supplement because they could get advertising for it. And so a few of us who were able to write about watches as part of our sort of freelance journalism lives suddenly found that we had an awful lot of work in that area, while everything else, you know, we had to go and pitch articles about other things, whereas people would come to us and go, can you, you know, write about this? So it became something that you then sort of found yourself, you know, you had to like it, but you became sort of expert in it. But it wasn't, and at the same time, there were people doing it, you know, back then was when, you know, Felix and I got to know each other on Twitter, I think, and there was a few people on you know, talking about it on Twitter, and people were starting to blog about it. I was very aware, I think I always have been, that the guys who came into it and started blogging because it was something they were passionate about and loved were, you know, in some ways sort of more authentically in this, I suppose you could say. I think as a journalist, it's quite good to be objective and be at one remove, you know. So I find the watch world very interesting, and there are certain watches that I, you know, really love, and I, you know, would definitely consider myself a watch guy because I love, you know, creativity and design, and that's sort of one of the side of it that I really like writing about. But I'm not a watch collector. I own watches, but I don't have the collecting bug in that way. And I think that, you know, you always have to sort of be aware that you are, to some extent, sort of one step removed from being, you know, a fanboy, which is probably quite, you know, as a journalist, a good thing. But it's important to remember the divide as well.
I was going to ask you a very different question, but I'm going to ask you another one because you've gone down that particular part of the rabbit hole. I find it interesting to, I'd completely forgotten that we knew each other on Twitter before, you know, in real life. Sorry about that. The divide between like professional journalists and passionate people that have built a business in the space is really interesting. Do you think that the success of those sort of predominantly digital sites that, you know, Hodinkee is a great example, came from that enthusiasm, that they came from that sort of in bed with the watchmaker perspective? Has that sort of challenged the area of watch journalism or media and made it harder for people like yourselves who are, you know, have an advertiser, you know, editorial writer relationship? Do you know what I'm asking? Like, is that sort of,
I think,
like,
yeah.
I would sell my left kidney for an MB&F, and I would say that MB&F is the greatest watches ever made, whereas you, writing for, you know, a Condé Nast publication, might not.
So are you asking, like, there are things that you can say from as a sort of like if you're writing as from a passion perspective as opposed to from a more journalistic perspective?
Or are you talking about the training element, Felix? This is something
not even the training, the mindset. Like, I
being
love
professional.
Watches are my life, where versus, hey, this is my job, I'm professional about it, I'm going to take it like a, you know, the industry that I am covering, you know?
I mean, I think that one thing that when things like Hodinkee and some of the other blogs started becoming much bigger, it certainly put the old school sort of print press on its game, and it also revealed the failings as well, because of course there was a sort of it depends on the publication, but the relationship between advertising and what got coverage, generally as a writer there's someone else who's handling that, but that could impinge things. Of course it's eventually impinged things maybe to even a greater degree in the blogosphere as well, or what grew from the blogosphere into sort of a whole sort of media landscape. So there are these sides of things that are quite opaque. I think that as a writer, you're just trying to sort of do the best job in terms of storytelling that you can. I always prefer that kind of feature writing to just the kind of stuff that's you feel is box ticking, and certainly there is a lot of box ticking in this, as there is in lots of other areas. I try and sort of veer away from that stuff when we can. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I mean yes, it is different. It is different, but you just try and do it well.
To be fair, I'm not sure I really asked a question. So
I'm not sure what the question was either. So the apologies to everyone listening. Tim, you said that you watch the watch industry and writing about watches fascinates you, and I'd love to know more. Maybe you've got the most bizarre story that you can comfortably share in a public setting.
A bizarre story of like the strangest thing that I've encountered in the watch world?
Yeah, to put you on the spot.
Well,
any sort of what is my life moments?
Oh God, I mean, a lot of those. I think anytime you said, I mean, the about when we first started going to SIHH in years gone by, when Roger Dubuis had a stand this was when they were sort of really sort of getting going with Excalibur as that they in a sort of completely random way alighted on, and their stand at SIHH was like a castle there were people who looked like they were from Game of Thrones. There was someone who walked around with an eagle on his shoulder and a sword. And these kind of things, like the levels of like theatricality they used to put into these kind of things, but particularly Roger Dubuis, which I don't really mind saying is a brand that I've never understood and have really no love for. I might have anti-love for, but that was like one of those kind of times when you just gone, what is this thing that we're doing here, and that people are putting incredible amounts of money into something so ridiculous as this. I mean, there's a lot of moments in the watch industry when you look at things and you just go, that is, a bit too much.
I think what makes it even more surreal, Tim, is that generally speaking, the Swiss take it really seriously. Like that would be a great night out if there was a sense of like fun and camp about it.
Yeah,
but
they
don't. They're like, no, this is our eagle and man with sword.
Very serious.
The man with sword, eagle, lightning rod or something, and then a sort of two fat guys in suits having a very serious conversation next to him, and that's SIHH, or it was. I think. I mean, having said that, I miss that slightly because now Watches and Wonders, it feels a lot more like that side of things has been toned down a little bit. I think they used to put so much theatricality into their stands, and it did feel absurd, but.
Well, how about this?
A bit more colourful.
How do you think the fairs have changed? Like, I mean, having gone for over a decade, obviously you just touched on that point, but in a more I guess, broader sense, what's the shift you've seen as watches have gone mainstream? Because you were there before, really before Hodinkee, but before it really kind of became mainstream and as we know it today, and social media and all that sort of stuff. And
it's difficult to think about when it really did become mainstream.
Yeah.
Like, has it only really been since the pandemic and everything sort of, all the kind of the Nautilus and Royal Oak blew up and everything, or was it already, more known about before that? It's difficult to say. I think, one thing I have noticed is now when I say to people I'm a watch journalist, they go, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." Whereas before they used to go, "What? That's a thing? How weird."
That's probably when it changed.
Yeah, I suppose. But I think that really only has been since the pandemic. I mean, the thing is, I miss Baselworld of old, which was, everyone hated it. But before it got really bad, it was always, I used to find it quite fun. It was a bit more kind of, there was a good chaos to it. Whereas you always had Baselworld on the one hand, which was huge and sprawling and chaotic, but quite interesting. And you had SIHH on the other hand, which was very smart and efficient but extremely organized and sort of stewarded, and you didn't have any of your own time. Now, I think Watches and Wonders has sort of combined both in a way that's very nice and very useful, but it's a bit more boring than either of them, I found this year. Last year, it was quite exciting to be back. This year just sort of felt kind of efficient. Going from brand to brand, get it done, onto the next one. I don't know. The spark that there used to be, the buzz, I didn't really feel it quite the same way this year.
I'd agree with that. The thing that I think I miss most about SIHH isn't the exact over-the-top booths. It's honestly, I've had some really, really lovely memories hanging out with the youth press team, because back in the day we used to sort of all have the same schedule. That Australians, South Africans, and UK were all in a group together. So I've
sort of non-American English speakers we were.
Like I've got a good relationship with a bunch of UK people, yourself included.
I totally agree.
I don't know.
Yeah, you would get, as a group, you would go from brand to brand. We used to, amongst some of us in the UK group, we used to play SAHH bingo, which was when we, like, a list of the sort of the words that would come up from brand to brand, that often sort of didn't have very much meaning, like iconique and specificity, and and all these kind of words that inevitably got attached to every single watch you saw there, every single presentation. That was how we kept things interesting. But now everybody's split up. You make your own appointments. You do a bit of touch and feel, it's not quite the same, is it? It's not as sociable.
Yeah, the watch brands, it's our favourite choice when the watch brands ask you which your favourite release of the fair is, and you have to kind of awkwardly bumble through that one. Felix mentioned there's a lot of news happening in the UK. There's you've got a new king, you've got a new Bremont CEO by way of Davide Cerrato, who is recently ex HYT, before that Montblanc, and before that Tudor US for a bit.
All of it.
What's going on there? What do you think that means for Bremont?
Well, so I mean, Davide Cerrato is one of the more interesting people in the watch industry. I think I've known him for a long time, since he was at Tudor. Before Tudor, he was at Panerai, and I mean, he's the guy who created the Black Bay, effectively. Who brought Tudor back from being something of a sort of a forgotten.
Well, they weren't in the USA at the time.
They were really just selling. They were mainly in sort of Asia, I think, as a sort of.
Yeah, they weren't in the market at all, I don't think.
a cheap equivalent of Rolex in Asia that sort of didn't make sense anywhere else, and their watches were truly horrible at that point. And
hey, I love a high
well,
end
I'm sure
watch.
some people disagree with me, but I mean, but when Davide was obviously sort of given the task of making it interesting and mainstream and exciting again, and did he do a good job with that? And he's someone who's very visual, he's extremely sartorial, and he was always in extremely nice Italian and English suits and things like that. So he did a great job with them. Then he went to Mont Blanc, which I think was probably a tougher task in some ways, because and I think he did a really good job at Mont Blanc, but it remains very difficult for them to kind of cross the divide between what they are as a wider brand and who and what they are as a watchmaker. And then he started to revive HYT. I don't know really where if that's been successful or not, because it hasn't been very long since he joined that. I think it was a year, but now he's at Bremont. I think that
about a year.
It's quite exciting from Bremont's point of view to have not just sort of someone who's an industry veteran, but probably who is a really good fit for Bremont. Like when it was announced, I was really taken aback. And then I kind of went quite quickly. I was like, actually, this makes total sense. He gets, he's quite an Anglophile, so I think but he also really understands how to make a sports watch stylish. I think desirable, which I think is probably what Bremont needs. I think Nick and Giles English, the founders, the brothers who founded it, they have got it to. They've done a lot of really good things. They've done a lot of things that a lot of people think are pretty controversial, and there's a lot of people I know who are not fans of Bremont for some of the decisions they've taken over the years. But I think that Davide is probably a very good person to inject something new. And I think, from my perspective, an injection of something new in terms of creative vision and where you can take the brand is what Bremont needs. I think it's been repeating itself to a certain degree for quite a few years, and possibly to, although it's got, it's built its factory, it's doing interesting things on a movement side. It's got, it launched its bracelet watch last year and things, but I think that it needs some new energy, and I think that'll probably see Nick and Giles English stepping back a little bit from being quite so much the sort of the face of the brand, and we'll see where that goes. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting appointment, and of course it comes off the back of them getting this huge investment from Bill Ackman, the sort of the Wolf of Wall Street, the biggest hedge funder on Wall Street, and he's made, what is it, £48 million investment in Bremont, and that's like a personal investment from him, rather than his hedge fund. So it's like a sort of a passion thing, which again, it's like, I mean, that's bizarre. I think it's extraordinary. But he sees the potential.
Tim, this is again potentially putting you on the spot, but you can handle it. Say your next call after us is you're catching up with Davide. What? And he's asking for your 10 cents. 10 pence. What would your sort of 3 top line priorities be for Cerrato era Bremont?
Oh, okay, that is a good question. I think probably they need to. It's a slightly tricky one, but they need to streamline their collections a bit and know exactly what their kind of hero products are down the line. They've got, they're a brand that started out doing aviation watches and chronographs as their sort of main thing. That's still probably their core. But I think so. One is like just streamlining their collections and maybe developing a new hero product that can really sort of fly in the same way that the Black Bay did at Tudor. I think that that would be good. I think that they need probably just a bit more of new direction as a brand as well. There's certain sort of well-worn areas that Bremont have been all over in terms of their military side of things. They like working with people who are rugged and adventurous. They do a bit of sport, and they're with, I think, Williams, the Formula One team.
Yep.
Normally somewhere near the back of the grid. And I think that it's kind of, they need some new dynamism in this kind of messaging so they can break out a bit more broadly. Because obviously, I think that they speak very well to the people that they always have spoken to, but I think that they probably need to go out more broadly.
Beyond that military core.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably, they do that so well, but they've got to go out in some new directions.
Yeah, you can only sell.
So that's what I hope Davide can do for them. Let's see.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, well, Felix mentioned anOrdain. They were a brand that we collaborated with a couple of years ago. Not going to say that they're inspired by us or not, but the timelines check out. Hodinkee and anOrdain released a watch, I think it was a week or two ago. Bit of a big move. What do you think of it, and what do you think of the watch itself? Because I'm sure you got to look at it.
I wish I got a look at it. I'm fortunate though. I haven't seen it because I've seen like a prototype of it. Okay. So I went to Lewis Heath, who founded anOrdain, had a watch on with a kind of like a yellow sunburst dial. So the watch that they launched with Hodinkee has this handmade sunburst dial. So it's everything is sort of scored by an engraver coming out from the center of the dial. And I think it's quite a difficult one to put across in pictures, because the one I saw, which had yellow enamel over it, kind of really sort of lurid yellow color, which looked actually kind of pretty fantastic. But it looks nothing like a normal sunburst dial. It really has so much more sort of deeper texture but what I haven't seen is the really sort of finished version of this with a grey enamel that they've done for Hodinkee. But I mean, I think it's one of the things that people have to understand with anOrdain is that as much as simply creating very nice enamel dial watches is what they do, they are about sort of pushing forwards the kind of techniques, discovering new ways of doing things, and sort of experimenting. They all come out of art school. Everybody who works there, and they bring that to it. It's like a little sort of art cooperative in a way. The atmosphere there, and it's very lovely as a result of that. But they are always sort of needing to try new things, as well as simply try and grapple with their incredibly long waiting list.
That's technique aside, and I'd like to see one of these dials at some point. And that, what do you think of the intersection of releasing this watch, which I believe isn't limited edition, just like limited production, through Hodinkee?
No, it's 25 units, I think.
Oh, I thought 25. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
it's 25.
Yeah, it's 25, and because I think it's taken them 2 years to make 25 watches. So I mean, they can make one of these a month or something.
But isn't it also going to be, I could be wrong, I should probably check this out, isn't it going to be part of their ongoing collection beyond?
Okay. So
that.
yeah, I think so. From speaking to Lewis, I think yes, so their kind of thing is, we don't do limited editions, or we don't really, we don't plan to do limited editions. This was kind of like 2 years in the planning, I think. So it was before they had to sort of develop the waiting list and things.
Mm, after
But
they hit
their other thing is that everything that we make
yeah,
should be available to anybody who wants to buy it.
sure.
And so I suppose that the particular enamel color will remain, would be my guess, would be associated with the Hodinkee watch.
Yeah.
But I know that they want to make it available. I think that they're working out how to do that because they can only make so few of these.
Yeah.
And so if everybody decides to get one, then the waiting list is going to be even longer. Obviously, it's going to be priced accordingly. It takes them into a different sort of price zone, and I don't know, but I think they're working out how to do that. But I don't think it's available yet.
Mm.
And but they certainly want to be able to do that. They don't want to go. The only way you will get the hand scored sunburst enamel dial is from the Hodinkee watch. No, it will be available, but there has to be a mechanism to do that.
It's such like, I mean, we've talked about it a few times, and it's not unique to anOrdain, but it is such a wild proposition for a brand that has that sort of built off that artisanal identity and handcraft that's suddenly blown up. And like you've said, they're a collective of artists that now have to almost have a crash course in luxury brand management and customer service. Yeah, it's such a uniquely post-COVID problem.
Post-COVID, post-Instagram problem, isn't it? I mean, I think that it's one of those things that, if people had done this 10 years ago, and there were people doing, interesting sort of creative things in watchmaking, that it was very, very difficult to find an audience for and would remain very, very niche until Instagram came along. And, what they've done with their price point is make enamel watches available at a price that they're not meant to be available at, if by the laws of Swiss industry. I remember when anOrdain exhibited at Salon QP, one of the last editions of Salon QP, which is the London watch exhibition we used to hold every year. And anOrdain exhibited, and Montblanc were there as well. And Davide Cerrato, coming back to him, came and had a look at the anOrdain watches, and I remember him saying to me, really interesting, should be more expensive. Like he was like, they're going to create a problem for themselves at that price point. And in a funny sort of way, he knew what he was talking about, because
sure enough,
that everybody, it's very difficult to understand why a watch at that price point has a 5-year waiting list, and these are very difficult things to marry together. It's a nice problem to have, but at the same time, it's a really tricky thing to manage.
It is a very real problem, and one that can be, harmful as it is, beneficial. Another watch with phenomenal wait lists and supply issues is, of course, the MoonSwatch. I would like to say, I've said it before, but I'd like to say it to your face. Your story for Wired is perhaps the best single piece of coverage I read about that.
Wow.
Thank you.
One of the few that wasn't, frothing with hyperbole left and right. Not least because you actually managed to speak to Hayek. How did you get that story out of
It was crazy. I mean, it was, in fact, it was exactly a year ago, pretty much. So when things were at the sort of the zenith of kind of MoonSwatch craziness, I went over to Biel, where Swatch are based, and sat down with Nick Hayek for 4 hours. I'd love to say that it was, the result of me pursuing him for weeks and months, but
Mm.
it was the case of my editor calling me up and asking me if I wanted to do it. And the reason was that I think Nick Hayek had done something with Wired like back in the early 2000s, and he therefore sort of felt like he had a relationship with the magazine, and so they were up for it. And I think that they wanted to tell the story a bit in a very sort of limited way. I think Robert Young from Fratello went around the same time as I did, and that was pretty much it. I had a friend who was trying to cover it for another sort of big publication, and they couldn't get an in. So I was lucky that they felt Wired was the right place to talk about it, and it was it was a fascinating story in so many ways, because I think that the most interesting thing that they were sort of saying about it was how that they had planned it. There were only like kind of about 7 or 8 people in the whole of Swatch Group who knew about it.
Really?
It was done in a really sort of they called it Project Galileo was their code name for it, and they did it.
I love a project name.
They had Gregory Kissling, the head of sort of product for Amiga. They pinched him for a few weeks to sort of help develop the project, and the designs, and they wanted, the reason they wanted to do it was to do something with this bioceramic material that they developed, and kind of get more interest in that, because I think it's very difficult being a company that makes disposable plastic products right these days, and so that's what they're trying to sort of move towards and shine a light on that. And it was exciting, but that was a nice story to do. I think the problem is, I don't know about you, I'm sort of disappointed with how it's gone sort of since then.
Yeah. Under the light of the pink moon.
Oh man, it's law of diminishing returns, isn't it? Maybe they need it all to calm down and not be so exciting anymore. But I think you feel like there's a real opportunity for them to do some more colors and interesting things, and I hope that will happen.
For me, though, it's classic Swatch Group. And I'd be interested on your take. Like, for me, they seem like a brand with so much there, so much to do, and they have occasional phenomenal hits, but they never quite have that sort of strong sustained second album or whatever it is. Where do you think the Swatch Group's at?
The interesting thing talking to Nick Hayek was that he is a real conundrum, because he sits on top of this big luxury group, and he doesn't like luxury. Like, this is why he is a Swatch guy through and through. Swatch is the flagship for him. He likes the fact that it's accessible to everyone. There's no there's no privilege associated with it. It's anti-elite, and those are the terms in which he described it. And I think that so Amiga is makes all the running for Swatch Group now, and the MoonSwatches, I think, sort of contributed a lot to the bottom line. But I think that a lot of people would say that they've got a problem really around Breguet and Blancpain and Harry Winston, and some of the other things, because they have stood still at a time when their peers in high luxury watchmaking have moved forwards pretty quickly. Swatch definitely sort of think about things differently. They don't want to come back to the fairs. They pretty much were the ones who pulled the plug on Baselworld, rightly, but they don't want to sort of be back in the fairs. They don't want to sort of speak to people in that way. And there is this sort of sense that Swatch has become a sort of Swatch Group has become a sort of a bit of an outsider within the industry. I mean, it's not, but from the point of view of what gets exciting, other than Omega, of course, which is a an absolute beast and does incredible things, but yeah, it is different.
What a great insight, Project Galileo. If I've taken anything away from our chat today, it is that code names are alive and well.
There you go.
And I love a good code name.
We need a code name.
We had one for the podcast, Felix. It was should I reveal our code name?
Yeah, do. I can't remember what it was.
It was Tsetse Fly.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
Takes him back. The old Tsetse Fly.
Yeah, throwback. All right, Tim. Well, the last question that we have time for that we ask all of our guests is for a recommendation on something that they have been enjoying. It can be a podcast, it can be a movie, it can be a book, it can be a lifestyle, it can be exercise, whatever it is. I want to hear it.
Okay, well, that's pretty easy. It's going to be a book, and it's so. Do you know Rebecca Struthers Watchmakers?
Yes, we had her
Rebecca is you had her on? So she's a British watchmaker, has this incredible business with her husband, Craig, hand-making watches here in the UK. And Rebecca's just published her book, all about really her history of watchmaking, and sorry, by the way, it's called Hands of Time, a watchmaker's story. It tells the history of watches and timekeeping through her own experience at the workbench, and her own experience as a watchmaker. And I think as a book that sort of is both informative, academic, ruminative, beautifully written, that tells the story of timekeeping and watchmaking, and also why that's an emotive, interesting, constantly exciting thing. It's fantastic, and it's just been published. So Hands of Time by Rebecca Struthers is the book that any watch fan should be reading.
Amazing. Well, we did have Rebecca on and she made the same recommendation, but it's good to know from an independent third party. More greatness coming out of the UK. Yeah. Felix, wrap it up.
I don't really have too much to say. Thank you so much for coming on, Tim. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, especially when we're recording it. I hope you have a lovely day.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time.
How nice is Tim?
Lovely Felix. Like I said, he's the Felix of Great Britain. He has that kind of section of the world covered.
To anyone else in the UK that we may have referred to as the Felix of Great Britain, I'm sorry. Hey, who's the Andy of Great Britain?
Who's the Andy of Great Britain?
Yeah.
Let me know. I don't know.
George Bamford. Chris Hall.
Yeah, maybe. Don't know.
Lewis from anOrdain.
Lewis. Oh, now that's a no.
Anyway, thank you so much, Tim. Thank you so much, IWC. We'll link all the pertinent things up. You can, of course, email us at otthepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at ot.podcast. What else can they do, Andy?
You can, join our Discord, leave a 5-star review, tell your friends, make sure you're referring people, make sure you're telling everyone about it. And of course, keep listening.
See you.
See you next time.